Imagine living every day of your life knowing that you're innocent, yet the world is convinced you're guilty. The betrayal that comes with being framed for something you didn't do. That's exactly what happened to David Cole. He spent 15 years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. But when the truth finally surfaced, it shattered everything David thought he knew about love, loyalty, and justice. David Cole was once a man with everything to live for. At 27, he had a bright future. He was engaged to Sarah Mitchell, the woman he loved with all his heart. They had just bought their first home in a quiet neighborhood, and David was on a fast track to a successful career in the tech industry. But everything changed on one fateful night. It was a chilly October evening when Sarah was met with a tragic end in their apartment. Struck multiple times, her still body left in the living room, a crimson-stained weapon still clutched in her hand. And right there, standing over her, was David. The police found traces of the incident on his clothes. His fingerprints were on the evidence. A neighbor reported hearing an argument between them earlier that night. David was the one who called 911, frantically screaming that he'd found her, but the case against him was undeniable. His own fiancée, the woman he had trusted more than anyone in the world, was now the reason he was being accused. The courtroom turned against him. Despite David's insistence that he was not responsible for what happened to Sarah, the jury convicted him. The emotional toll of losing Sarah was nothing compared to the weight of knowing that the woman he loved had seemingly set him up. But the real gut punch came when the prosecution introduced statements Sarah had made to others, statements about how David had snapped, how their relationship had deteriorated, and how he had been unstable and aggressive in the days leading up to the tragedy. These statements had been shared with Emily and others close to Sarah, and they were later relayed to police, becoming key evidence used against David during the trial. David was sentenced to 15 years, a life destroyed, a future stolen. Years passed, and David never stopped fighting for his innocence. He sent letters, filed motions, but the legal system failed him. No one believed him. Everyone thought he was guilty, and with each passing year, it felt like the walls of prison closed in tighter. He couldn't escape the relentless thoughts of what had happened, his once bright future, now overshadowed by these falsehoods. If you're as shocked and hooked on this story as we are, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories. Don't miss a single twist. Hit that bell icon so you're the first to know when new stories drop. Then one day, a letter arrived. It was from an old friend, a fellow inmate who had just been released. The letter contained a single name, Emily Jameson. Emily had been Sarah's best friend, someone who had been by Sarah's side throughout their relationship, someone David had trusted deeply. David's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't thought about Emily in years. She had visited him in prison, sent him letters, and even promised she would help him clear his name. For years, David had thought of Emily as someone who believed in his innocence. But now, after everything that had happened, doubts began to creep in. Could Emily have known the truth, or was she part of the lie? The letter mentioned a conversation Emily had with Sarah shortly before the incident, one that David had never been aware of. That detail made David's heart race. What could Emily know? And why hadn't she told him the truth? David pushed for his case to be reopened, and after months of legal wrangling, the evidence was re-examined. New DNA tests were conducted on the weapon used in the attack. The results were jaw-dropping. The DNA didn't belong to David. It didn't belong to Sarah either. The forensic team traced the DNA back to someone no one had suspected, Emily Jameson. David was stunned. How could Emily's DNA be on the weapon? Had she been involved? Was she the one who framed him? His mind raced as he demanded to speak with her. He had to know the truth. When David finally met Emily, it was in the prison visitation room. She walked in, her head lowered, her expression unreadable. For the first time, David saw the cracks in the facade. The woman who had once been his confidant now seemed like a stranger. He asked her the question that had been eating at him for years. "Why didn't you tell me the truth, Emily? Why did you lie?" Emily's hands trembled as she reached into her bag, pulling out a file. Her eyes avoided his, but the moment she opened the file, everything changed. She flipped it open, and David's eyes fell on a photograph. It was a picture of a man David had never seen before. standing in the background of a photo taken at one of Sarah's birthday parties. "That's him," Emily whispered. "He's the one who did it." David's heart skipped. "Who is he?" Emily's voice shook. "It's someone I never thought I'd have to tell you about. Someone who's been hiding in plain sight. He's been covering his tracks for years." Before David could process what she was saying, the door to the visitation room opened, and two officers stepped inside. One held a thick file. The officer handed it to Emily, and she froze. Her face paled, and she looked at David with wide, frightened eyes. The officer's voice was firm. "This isn't over, Mr. Cole. You may have been wrongfully imprisoned, but the actual perpetrator is still out there." The officer's words hung in the air, and David's world shattered again. He had been framed by someone he trusted, someone he had never suspected, and now, the one who took Sarah's life was still free. David leaned forward, desperate. Who is he? Who's the real culprit? But Emily only shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You're not ready for the whole truth. Not yet." As Emily was escorted out of the room, David's mind raced. The truth he had been waiting for had just begun to unfold, and the more he learned, the more questions there were. The true assailant, was he someone David had known all along, or someone else entirely? And what role did Emily play in this twisted web of lies? As David sat there, alone, the cold truth washed over him. The man who had destroyed his life was still out there, walking free. David couldn't just sit back and wait for justice. He had to find him before it was too late. David Cole's life was supposed to be over when they locked him away. But 15 years in prison had done something he hadn't expected. It had given him the time to think, to reflect, and most importantly, to wait for the truth to come to light. But after hearing that one name, after the revelation that Emily Jameson, Sarah's best friend, had somehow played a role in the twisted game that had stolen his life, David couldn't rest. Emily had told him the truth, but there was more. The actual perpetrator was still out there, someone David had never suspected, someone so close to Sarah, so entwined in her life, that he had no idea they were even part of this nightmare. The truth hit him like a brick, as Emily had handed over the file with the photograph, showing the man who had been lurking in the background of Sarah's life. David's stomach twisted. Who was he? Was this the same person Emily had been hiding for all these years? The man who had been so careful, so meticulous in covering his tracks, that not even David had seen it coming? David couldn't believe it. He had been wronged by his fiancée, framed by the woman he loved. Emily, someone he had trusted and confided in, had known the truth all along and never told him. But the real question was, why? The officers who had come into the visitation room were like shadows. They didn't say much, but their presence made the air thick with suspicion. One of them had dropped a bombshell. The one responsible is still out there. Emily had reacted with fear in her eyes, telling David, "You're not ready for the whole truth. Not yet." David was left sitting in the empty room, the weight of Emily's words lingering. The real culprit was someone else, a person who had manipulated the situation so completely that David had never seen it coming. His heart pounded as he thought about the twists and turns, the secrets Emily had hidden from him. Was it too late to make things right? Had the assailant already vanished, leaving David to fight for justice that seemed further out of reach than ever? But one thing was clear. David couldn't just let it go. He needed to find the person who did this, and no one, not even Emily, was going to stop him. David's search for the truth began the moment he was released from prison. With nothing but a small sum of money, a determination to find the answers, an old photograph of the man Emily had pointed to, David stepped out into the world he hadn't seen in years. He didn't waste time. He hired a private investigator, a grizzled former cop named Reuben, who was no stranger to hunting down those who thought they had escaped justice. Reuben had helped David's lawyer with the appeal, and now he was helping David find the person who had framed him. Together, they pored over the file Emily had given him. The man in the photo, David learned, was named James Archer. He had been Sarah's high school friend, a man who had somehow remained on the fringes of her life, someone she kept around but never fully allowed to get too close. He had been at every major event in Sarah's life, her birthday parties, family gatherings, but never once did David suspect him. It was too late now to undo the past, but it wasn't too late to find Archer and make him accountable. Rubin's investigation turned up disturbing details. Archer had a history, one that wasn't immediately apparent on the surface. A history of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but always managing to walk away clean. In the months before Sarah's passing, Archer had been seen lurking around their apartment building. And there was one detail that stood out. Archer had been mysteriously absent on the night of the incident, despite having been invited to a gathering where David and Sarah had last spent time together. David felt a chill when Rubin uncovered something even more haunting. Archer had been the last person to call Sarah that evening, just hours before she was found. A phone call that David hadn't known about. It had been made at 8:56 p.m. That was the time Sarah had been planning to meet with a friend. David had assumed it was Emily, but now the phone records told a different story. And then came the bombshell. The DNA found at the scene didn't just match Emily's. It also matched someone who had been close to Sarah all along, James Archer. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. Archer, the man who had stayed in the background, always just a friend, had actually been the one who had taken Sarah's life. He was the one who had framed David, planted the evidence, and twisted the truth to make it all seem like David had done it. The closer David got to uncovering the truth, the more dangerous things became. Archer, it seemed, wasn't as careful as David had once thought. Rubin managed to track down an address, one that led them to a small, unassuming house on the outskirts of the city. But when they arrived, the house was dark. No one was home. David felt a cold sensation settle over him. Could Archer be hiding? Or was he waiting, watching, ready to strike? David stepped out of the car, his eyes scanning the shadows. He knew the time was coming, and he couldn't wait any longer. The man who had destroyed his life was close. So close, David could feel it. And as he walked toward the house, the one question that had haunted him for years echoed in his mind. Why had Archer done it? Why had Emily helped him? Why had they framed David? Was there something deeper here? Something more sinister than he had ever imagined? David was about to find out. And just as he reached the door of the house, a sudden crack rang out from the darkness. A sharp crack rang out from the darkness, so sudden and piercing it made David freeze. For a moment, everything stood still. His heart raced in his chest, his breath shallow. He hadn't heard the strike coming, but now he felt it hanging in the air, thick with tension. David spun around, eyes wide, searching the shadows for the source. The quiet of the night felt suffocating, every creak of the wind sending his pulse into overdrive. He had been so close. The man who had framed him, the one who had destroyed his life, was right there. James Archer was inside this house, and David was about to confront him. But now, he wasn't sure what was waiting for him. Another blast rang out, this time closer. David ducked instinctively, his body jerking to the side, but he wasn't fast enough. Something grazed his arm, a searing pain coursing through him. His vision blurred for a second, but he gritted his teeth and pushed forward. He had to know the truth. The man who had stolen 15 years of his life, the man who had manipulated everyone around him, was right there. David wouldn't leave until he had answers. He pressed his back against the house, his breathing ragged, crimson droplets trickling down his arm as he moved toward the door. With every step, the tension grew. Was Archer waiting for him, armed and ready to finish the job? Just as David reached the front door, it creaked open. A figure stepped out, Emily Jameson. David's heart skipped a beat. What was she doing here? Was she working with Archer all along? Had she been the one pulling the strings behind the scenes? For a split second, he thought of running, but something in her eyes made him freeze. David, Emily said, her voice soft but strained. I couldn't let you do it. You're working with him. David spat, his injury stinging, his face flushed with anger. You knew all along. You knew it was Archer. You knew I was innocent. And you let me stay there for 15 years. Emily's eyes welled with tears. It wasn't like that. David's pulse pounded in his ears. Had she really been involved? Or was there something deeper, something more twisted? Then why didn't you help me, Emily? David's voice shook with emotion. Why didn't you tell the truth? Why did you let me stay in that cell, knowing I was innocent. Emily took a step back, her hand trembling. I didn't want you to know. I never wanted you to know the truth. But you have to hear it. You have to understand. David's eyes narrowed. Understand what? She hesitated, the weight of what she was about to say hanging heavily between them. The truth about Sarah, about Archer, about everything. Before she could say more, a loud voice interrupted them. Emily, don't. It was James Archer, stepping out from the shadows. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic, but his voice was cold. You can't tell him. David's stomach dropped. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. Archer wasn't just the assailant. He was the reason for everything. But now, there was something even worse, something that would shatter the entire case. What do you mean? David asked, his voice low but steady. What truth is there left to tell? Archer stepped forward, his hands shaking. I didn't take Sarah's life, he said, his voice cracking. Emily did. David felt the ground shift beneath him. Emily? What was he saying? The woman who had been a part of his life for so long, the one who had been his supposed ally. She was the one responsible? Emily looked at David, her eyes filled with tears, but there was no denying the horror of what she had just heard. It's true, David, she whispered. I did it. David stood frozen, unable to speak. Emily Jameson, the woman who had visited him in prison, sent him letters, promised to help him. She was the one who had ended Sarah's life? His fiancée? The woman who had once been Sarah's closest friend had orchestrated it all. She had set David up, used him as a fall guy for a tragedy she had committed. She had lied, manipulated, and used everyone around her to cover her tracks. How? Why? David's mind couldn't process the betrayal. Archer, his face pale and exhausted, continued. I was just her scapegoat. She needed someone to take the fall, but it was her all along. David took a step back, the words sinking in. But why? Why would you do it, Emily? She shook her head. Because she had something I wanted. Something that was mine. You. David's breath caught in his throat. What are you talking about? Emily's voice cracked as she spoke the words that would change everything. I was in love with you, David, she whispered. I always was. And when Sarah got in the way of that, I couldn't let her take you from me. So I did what I had to do. David stood there, his entire world unraveling in front of him. Emily, the woman he had trusted, the woman who had stood by him in his darkest hours, had destroyed everything. And the worst part? She had done it all out of jealousy. But as Emily's confession hung in the air, there was still something he didn't understand. Something felt off. Something wasn't adding up. Could it really be that simple? Could Emily have acted alone? Or was there something much bigger lurking behind the scenes? What do you think? Was Emily acting alone, or is there more to this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear all of it. Like and subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. The truth is just getting started.